Hey there, this is Della Rucker. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am the principal of the Wise Economy Workshop and author of the recent book, The Local Economy Revolution, What's Changed and How You Can Help. For those of you who aren't familiar with my work or with this book, my focus is really on creating and helping to support the creation of communities that will be resilient going into the future, and going into a future that in many cases is very different from the past that we have come up in and that has kind of formed our mindsets. So a big piece of what this book and what a lot of my work has been about is creating opportunities for all of us to rethink, reevaluate, and rejigger. Is that a word? I think so. At least it's the word where I grew up. But to kind of redesign and reset how we do the work of taking care of the communities that we care about and helping those communities to become more resilient, to become healthier, to become more capable of having productive economic lives in, as I said before, a future that may be very different from what we have been accustomed to. I've been a planner, I've been an economic developer, I've been a historic preservation specialist. I've kind of worked across a range of professions that focus on communities and on places. And one of the things that I became really aware of over time was that the ways that I had been taught to do things didn't always necessarily line up with what seemed to be the world around me at that moment. So that was the genesis for this book and for a lot of the work that I've done over the past 10 or 11 years. So if you're not familiar with my work, you can go ahead and learn a good deal more about that at wiseeconomy.com. You can also find other writings and work of mine on YouTube at Della Rucker, AICP CECD on YouTube, and in a bunch of other places. My first name is, as you can see, Della is not exactly a super common name, so really easy to find. Excuse me. So I have been in the habit of doing a little reading as often as I can. And today's reading, excuse me, figures I get on here and then what my mother's family name was Snodgrass. And she always used to call that funny coughing thing the Snodgrass throat, which I think is a little weird, but it's certain the older I get, the more I'm like, definitely every time I probably do that once a day where something catches. And it's just like, okay, there's the Snodgrass throat back in action again. So the reading for today is focused not on any of those professions that I just named, but on an additional one called public engagement. And public engagement is sort of a it's what you see done anytime people are doing, there's going to be a big development or a road project and there is a public engagement activity. And I used to do this. And I got super, super, super frustrated with them because I felt like we weren't really doing anything that was of value. And in fact, a lot of times I felt like a hypocrite because people would give you their feedback and sometimes they're frustrated, they're angry, they've already been left out of the process. And so you're automatically going into a problematic situation at best. And one of the things that I think is absolutely crucial to good community revitalization, downtown revitalization, urban development, economic development, whatever, is that we have to get much, much, much better at co-creating with our communities, with co-designing with our communities, with pulling them into the process of making the decisions, because when we don't, it comes back to, just to be strictly practical about the situation, it'll bite us. It bites us in the end, and it almost always does. And it makes the whole process much more miserable for everybody involved than it should have been if we'd just meaningfully engaged folks in the first place. So a lot of this book, as well as another book that I wrote, which is called Crowdsourcing Wisdom, is about the challenges with the way that we do any kind of public engagement whenever we're going to do something, that whether we're a local government or we're a business, we very typically sort of do it as a very sort of keep your distance kind of process. And increasingly, people are less and less and less satisfied and less trusting of the powers that be to make decisions that they feel will account for their best interests. And so this chapter that I'm going to be reading today is about 3 of the primary things that we all, anybody who presents an idea to the public, does wrong. So the 3 main barriers to meaningful public engagement. One of the biggest, often overlooked challenges we're facing today is that our traditional debate model of public involvement isn't working. And it's probably outlived its usefulness. There's at least 3 reasons for that. First, the traditional stand up and make a speech approach. Think about a city council meeting and there's a microphone, and at a certain point in time, if you have public comment, you have to go up to the microphone and talk there. Think about that. The traditional stand up and make a speech approach evolved in an epoch when public participation was limited to a much narrower portion of the total population than we know need to be involved today. 19th century politics, really going back to the ancient Greeks, if you want to be honest about it, was limited to reasonably educated white men. So even when there were differences of opinion on local issues, everyone in the room was coming from, in somewhat broad terms, the same perspective. Today, we have a lot more voices. We have a wider range of voices, and not everyone has been taught how to express themselves adequately within that old-fashioned oratory model. So we get silence from a large portion of the population, and often less than ennobling wisdom from the small number who do stand up to speak. The second reason is that the issues that we have to grapple with have become much, much more complicated because of the interdependencies and interrelationships that we live with within a modern community. You can't deal with too much complexity, address too many address too many nuances, and acknowledge that there may not be a perfect solution when you're at a podium for 3 minutes, or when the situation has been cast, as it so often is, as a for or against debate. So we hurt ourselves just by that basic structure. The third issue is that the way in which we gain understanding and grapple with decisions, they're changing. K-12 education methods, how teachers are being taught to teach, has largely discarded the lecture as a useful means of building knowledge. Instead, teachers are increasingly shifting to methods that engage the students directly in dealing with the information, making sense out of it for themselves, which means that they develop better and more meaningful solutions to the problems that are presented. Frankly, that should have happened long ago. Cognitive psychiatrists, get all the words right today, have known for generations that only a very small part of the population learns best by listening to someone talk. And the more we become used to living in a world that's rich with information of all types, the more we need to do than simply listen to other people talk in order to understand anything. So what does educational methodology have to do with public participation? Everything. What we desperately need is for our citizens to do much more than spout ill-informed NIMBYisms or buy into knee-jerk, simplistic cause and effect assumptions. We need to first draw on the unique local knowledge, perspective, and expertise of everyone that we can get our hands on. 2, we need to get them reasonably up to speed on the issues and not be afraid of giving them a reasonable level of complexity. And number 3, engage them. Get their hands deeply into the search for solutions. Solutions that are realistic and address the complexities and ambiguities of real community life. Major companies are putting massive amounts of effort into broadening their employee base to include the widest range of people possible, and then creating team environments to work on solving complex challenges. If they're finding it necessary to use diverse team problem solving to deal with stuff like getting shampoo into a bottle, how much more do we desperately need real, deep involvement to deal with the massive complexities that make up a modern community? So it's not simply a matter of throwing a bunch of people in a room with a problem and hoping they'll figure it out. That'd be foolish. Think about what that would be like in a classroom. Instead, we who work with communities have to borrow a page from good teachers and good business team managers. So we need to first carefully create a structure that moves people through the information that they need efficiently. Spoiler alert, that might not be a 14-page PDF or a 37-slide PowerPoint with 14 points on every slide, no matter how much you love your project. That's not the way to do it. Second is to channel their efforts in the right direction. Third, to make it safe for everyone to truly participate and bring what they have to the table, including your sweet grandmother, who would be terrified to speak at a microphone in public. And finally, lead them to the creation of something that has value to the community and makes the time and the effort that they spent worthwhile. Here's the amazing part. The tools to do this, they're already out there. We just have to learn to use them in this context. So again, that was a reading from The Local Economy Revolution Has Arrived, What's Changed, and How You Can Help. Available wherever you order your books and your ebooks. And thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to share ideas in this context, even on the days where I'm bobbling words a little more than I wish I were. You know, some days are like that. But I think we have an amazing opportunity, and I've been saying this for years, the opportunities that we have to really transform our communities, not just to be able to react to the way the world around us is changing, But in order to be able to embody some of the principles and some of the approaches that are so important to many of us to reinvigorate local democracy, those are crucially important. And we've got the opportunity to do that. But doing things the same way that we've done them for decades is not necessarily the way to make that happen. So if you take anything from my readings, from my work, from things you've read from me, take that awareness that we have the opportunity to do the new and to create the communities that we want to be in and to help the communities we care about grow into the future-ready, vibrant places that we want them to be. But it takes all of us, and it takes being ready to work in new ways. So thanks again. I appreciate your watching, and until I see you again, go get 'em.